Well, good evening and welcome to another webinar by the Halia Diet. We're glad that you're taking time out of your busy week to join us this evening, but I think we have an exciting topic for you. Is soy safe? And there's a lot of pros and cons and a lot of people saying different things about soy, and they have been for many years. And Dr. Donaldson set out to see what the research really showed so he can give you a really great answer. So we can't wait to get you the information that he's put together. But before we get started, just like to really welcome you. I'm Paul Malcolmus, the president of Halia Diet, and it's certainly a privilege to have you here with us this evening. Before we start, though, I'd like to ask the Lord to bless our evening. Dear Lord, we just thank you for this day and thank you for the opportunity to present this information. We pray that the information we share will be insightful and helpful, and Dr. Donaldson will have the right words and we'll be able to understand the intent of the message, Lord. Pray that you'll cover all the equipment and technology, that everything runs smoothly, and that we honor you through this. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Well, this is a really exciting week for Halia Diet. Believe it or not, it's been 28 years tomorrow that Halia Diet started. And Reverend Malcolmus celebrates his 86th birthday tomorrow. So it's a couple of great milestones here. So we're just real excited this week as we celebrate some many years of helping people. And it's just amazing how many people over the years that have been, and lives have been impacted by the message that we're able to share. And it started with Reverend Malcolmus having a passion and a message. And he really helped a lot of people and took this message really far and wide. So as we get started this evening, if you have any questions, just feel free to put it in the question section down there, and we'll do our best to answer them. If we don't get to them through the session, we'll do a question and answer at the end. And Dr. Donaldson's been with Halia Diet since 1998, and that's been a long time. And he's been an invaluable asset to the science behind the Halia Diet. He's a chemical engineer graduate from Cornell University and is the research director of Halia Diet. He's done many research projects and papers that have been published, and he helps us with our product research and acquisition as well. So Dr. Donaldson, it's a real privilege to have you with us this evening, and we look forward to hearing what you have to share.
All right, thank you very much, Paul. I'm excited to be here tonight and excited to share this information with you. So stuff has been gathering over time, and you're probably aware of controversy about soy products being controversial about this and that, and some people say you should never touch them and you should eat a lot of other things and never touch soy products at all. So initially back in the 90s, there was a lot of information that was based on cell studies, animal studies, and there wasn't a lot of data with people, but that has changed over the last 20 years, and we have a lot of solid data. So we're going to talk about that. So really, we want to talk about the controversy that's in soy products. First of all here, and then after we talk about a couple of fundamental questions, we'll dive into some of the science and use the science to answer some of these questions here. The issue at hand really is the isoflavones. They are the phytoestrogens that are in plants, and they're particularly abundant in soy products. The soybean just has those in a way that other beans don't have it there. And questions have been raised, as far as cancer, since they have estrogenic activity, do they promote cancer the way estrogen does? How could they not? Do they change hormone levels in men and women? Since they have estrogenic activity, they must affect it somehow, and probably in a negative way. Is using soy formula like giving your infant birth control pills? Since it has estrogenic activity, what do we know about that? That's big questions at the time, back in the mid-90s, and it was something you would stay away from soy because you didn't really know the answers to that. And the studies that were coming out based on animals and in vitro studies, they didn't have really good results. So you're kind of wondering, well, what does that mean for us? So we want to look at that controversy, and there is good science data now in people, not just in animals and cell studies, but actually people who have used soy and comparing with people that didn't in the same environment and looking at those answers. So just tonight here, we're not talking about the effects of genetically modifying soybeans or the effect of adding Roundup to this genetically modified soybeans, and the effect of all that has on your gut. Clearly, that's not a beneficial thing to do to your soybeans. But we're talking about organic soybeans here. And if you use soybeans in their pure state, what would the effect be? So we're trying to separate these two issues. That's a whole separate issue there. So there's two fundamental questions we want to talk about. The first question has to do with these animal studies and the in vitro studies. What do those mean for people? Is their metabolism of isoflavones close enough to ours that we can learn something from those studies? See, and it has to do with how much of the active form is running around in the blood of the animal or inside of us. So there's an answer for this, and we don't have to wonder. We can just go to the next slide. So we see here, comparing a cute little mouse. If you give a mouse soy products, and there's 4 different mice here, and I don't think I have a pointer here. Well, I could use a pointer. Let's see, if you compare the people, whether they're taking babies drinking soy infant formula, or people with a soy germ supplement or soy milk, they have something that's around 1% or a little bit less of the active form of the phytoestrogens in their bloodstream, whereas mice could be 20, 50, 150 times as high. So they have a lot of the unconjugated genistein in their bloodstream. It's not really an equivalent study, and they're not a good model for what happens in people. And that's one of the issues there. You give a mouse what would think would be a good amount for a person, and then you find out that, well, it's really not a good amount at all. And so we end up having to say that these studies are not good, that they don't translate into the human experience. So that's one problem we had in the 90s, but we had animal studies and find out, well, no, they don't metabolize the phytoestrogen the same way we do. So you have to throw out that data. It says, well, that doesn't help at all. So if someone's quoting you saying that soy products are dangerous because of this animal study, it was really bad. It made these animals infertile. Well, that doesn't mean it will do the same thing in people at all. The second question is this: what about estrogen receptor beta? And you'll find that people that are negative about soy products and really down on them and say they're very dangerous, they will not tell you about this other receptor. This was discovered in 1996. They always thought there was just one estrogen receptor. Before that, they just called it that, estrogen receptor. But it has a different role. It's not the same as the estrogen receptor alpha. So you have to ask, well, what's different about them? What do phytoestrogens bind to? What does estradiol bind to? I went back and looked at the Western Price Foundation website and to see what they said about estrogen receptor beta. It's not even on their website. They don't talk about it. There's no information about the difference between the alpha and the beta receptors. It's not there. There's a book published in 2005 called The Whole Soy Story by Kayla Daniel, PhD, CCN. So she's got the initials and everything. And her book doesn't contain anything about estrogen receptor beta either. That was 9 years after they discovered this. And there's a whole bunch of research that was done in those 9 years. Because it opened up a lot of questions here. And so that was, a big deal here. And if you look at this information, I'll try to walk you through this a little bit here. On the red line here, this is the relative binding of isoflavones to either the alpha or the beta form of the estrogen receptor. And these receptors are actually even on different chromosomes. They're not even like different parts of the same gene. They're actually completely different genes on different chromosomes. So the estrogen receptor alpha here, the estradiol binds to that, and it's about 0.03 micromolar. That's the amount of estradiol that it takes to activate the receptor at a 50% level. So at 0.03 micromolar. And you see the genistein and daidzein, much, much higher levels. This 500 times more genistein it takes compared to estradiol to activate the estrogen receptor alpha. Over on the estrogen receptor beta, if you look at the genistein in the yellow line here, that's 0.03 micromolar. That's the same level as estradiol was on the estrogen receptor alpha here. See, this is a physiological level that's actually possible with genistein. It binds preferentially 500 times more in this comparison, 500 times more likely to bind and activate the beta receptor than the alpha receptor. And the dateine is very similar to that. It's even more, it even leans more towards the estrogen receptor beta here. So you find that when you eat soy products, it's going to activate the beta receptor, not the alpha receptor. So there's going to be very different effects here with the phytoestrogens. They will compete for binding on the estrogen receptor beta with the estradiol, and maybe don't have quite the same activity there. But you find that it's not just trying to compete for binding on the alpha receptor, but actually binding to the estrogen receptor beta and causing different effects. So that changes a lot of things here. That just the fact that there are two receptors changes everything. Because then the phytoestrogens, they're not acting the same way as estradiol does at all. And there's another fact too, is that when you look at where you find the alpha and the beta receptors in the body, you find, it's not the same everywhere. Breast tissue has both alpha and beta receptors. The uterus only has alpha receptors. So the phytoestrogens, isoflavones, are not going to have much activity in the uterus, which is what they find in the literature. In the ovary, some of the cells have alpha receptors. The granulosa cells don't. No, they have the beta receptors. Bones have both alpha and beta receptors. Testes and epididymis in the male, they have only the alpha receptors. Those are very hormone sensitive tissues. In the prostate, the supportive tissues only have the alpha receptor. The epithelial cells in the prostate, those are cells that will reproduce out of control when you have prostate cancer. Those ones have the beta receptor in them. The liver only has alpha receptors, doesn't have beta receptors. So again, you wouldn't expect a lot of results on liver metabolism with beta receptors and phytoestrogens and isoflavones. Fat tissue, cardiovascular system, central nervous system has both kinds of receptors. The immune system, you'll find beta receptors, and as well as in the colon, but not alpha receptors. So there's a different distribution of these receptors being expressed in different parts of the body. And so it makes a big difference. So with that information, we want to look at breast cancer because that's one of the main concerns with phytoestrogens and isoflavones in particular. What is the effect of soy products on breast tissue and in case of breast cancer? Well, in this case here, the alpha receptor is more of a tumor promoter because it helps cells grow and it promotes cell growth and proliferation. And the beta receptor in breast tissue actually has an opposing effect. It counters the effect of the estrogen receptor alpha. It's more of a suppressor. And in normal breast tissue, you find the beta receptor all over the place, widely expressed. When a tumor forms, it's interesting that actually the tumor causes a downregulation of the beta receptor. It's a process of hypermethylation. The promoter doesn't stick to the DNA at that point, and it doesn't get transcribed. So you don't get the protein for the beta receptor expressed. And so what that means is, you can help prevent breast cancer, but you can't do any kind of treatment of a tumor with isoflavones because the beta receptors just are not there at that point. They get downregulated. So as I said, it seems to inhibit cell proliferation. Things that bind to the estrogen receptor beta will activate that and cause less proliferation. It will promote normal cell death or regulated cell death. If abnormal cells start to go a little bit haywire, the beta receptor, when it's activated, will tend to curb that activity. And I spent a whole day trying to figure out what was the difference and how that worked in breast cancer. And I found out it was really complicated. And even the scientists writing about that said they didn't fully understand that. And they've been working on it for 15 or 20 years. So this may not be complete here. It gives you the basic idea. And it's pretty widely known that there's an opposing effect of the alpha and beta receptors in breast cancer. And so that's what effects there are there at that level. So we can ask the question then, are soy products, do they decrease the risk of breast cancer or do they increase the risk? And if you eat soy products, or if you ate soy products at this point during your childhood or during adolescence, is that a harmful thing or a protective thing? So we can look at the data. We don't just have to ask the question, we can look at the answer. So they've looked at this in Asian populations and Asian Americans because those are the populations who have traditionally eaten soy products. So that's why they're looking there. You're looking among Americans, and they just don't eat enough soy products to have enough isoflavones in the blood to really even answer the question here. But so of these studies, there's 8 studies here. The last 3 didn't really find significant differences, but the other 5 are pretty strong. And overall, if you add all 8 of them together, do the analysis together, there's about a 30% decreased risk of breast cancer for those who ate higher levels of soy products, either as adults or as adolescents. And this was published in 2008. If you fast forward to 2014, there's a lot more studies. Again, this is an Asian group here. The main thing you need to focus at is the last number in the column here, where it says 0.59. And the 2 numbers there in parentheses, that's the 95% confidence interval. The important thing to know that is that it doesn't cross 1. It's all less than 1 there. So that means that it's statistically significant reduction of breast cancer there. And that's about a 30% reduction, 40%, excuse me. About a 40% reduction in risk of getting breast cancer for those that are eating a lot of soy products. So is it safe? Yeah, it's safe. It's actually protective. And they found in the midst of this, when they're looking at breast cancer risk, they were able to query people as adults what they ate during adolescence, even ask their moms what they fed their children when they were little. And they found that really those who had the most soy products were actually more protected. In fact, in the Shanghai Women's Health Study, women were most protected when they had soy intake that was high during adolescence as well as adults. If you had to pick which section you need to have high soy intake, it was actually the effect was it carried through from adolescence. So if you had high intake of soy protein or soy products during adolescence, it caused some changes in the breast tissue right then, some differentiation that prevented breast cancer. So even as an adult, if you didn't have high intake of soy, it was still protective all by itself. So that was pretty interesting. Not only is it, safe, but it was actually protective. So that's the first point here. Breast cancer risk was reduced by eating soy products. Well, what happens if you eat soy products after you've had breast cancer? For a while, there was a lot of warnings issued that you shouldn't have soy products if you've had breast cancer. It might interfere with the treatments that they were doing with tamoxifen, or it might cause more cancer since it was a phytoestrogen, and you figure it would have estrogenic activity. So that was a question, but we have answers. We don't have to just wonder about the question. So breast cancer survival in Chinese women. This is a study of 256 women, and they looked at levels of soy all the way from less than 8 to more than 35 milligrams per day of soy isoflavones, and that would come from a couple servings of soy products a day. And they studied them over 5 years. If you follow the purple line across the top, at the end of 5 years, you still have 90% of the women still alive, still functioning, still going strong. Whereas the women who didn't have soy products, they, only half of them were still alive at 5 years. Even at 2 years, you go out just to 24 months and you look at the difference there. Even at 24 months, the difference is pretty dramatic. Like there's no deaths in the high soy group, and 40% of the no soy group has already died. So that's just one study, one prospective study following a group of women, but there's more than that. There's a lot more information than that. In fact, there's been 5 large studies been done at this point. And I don't know if there's any more running because they pretty much answered this. And the number you want to focus on here is the blue one down at the bottom, which is 11,224. That's the number of women altogether that have been studied to answer this question. These are all women who have already had breast cancer, gone through treatment, and they just see the ones who ate more soy product compared to the ones who eat less soy. And they distribute versus menopausal status, whether they've had tamoxifen or not, and whether their cancer was estrogen receptor positive or negative. So they looked at all those different factors and try to see what can we learn from these 5 different studies here. And the meta-analysis, there's a lot of little numbers here, but you really want to focus on the numbers over at the right, where it says death minus 16.5%. So that's the drop in risk of death if you had higher soy intake. You see the studies here. The middle bar in the middle has a 1 at the bottom. That would mean that it's a wash in the study, that there's no significant difference between eating soy or not. And the diamond that's over to the left means that soy is protective. And in the recurrence, you see when they measured recurrence, that's the diamond over on the left. There's a minus 26.5% less risk of recurrence of breast cancer for those that were having more soy products. So when you put it all together, it was quite safe. In fact, it was actually protective to have some soy in a person's diet after they've had breast cancer. And it didn't get in the way of tamoxifen. In some cases, it actually enhanced the activity and the effectiveness of the therapy with tamoxifen. So that was pretty good information for us to breathe a breath of relief, knowing that these phytoestrogens are very different from estrogen within the body. So the next question, if we've handled breast cancer, we've made it through that. Soy was safe. As a woman, it didn't cause breast cancer, and if you had breast cancer, it wouldn't make it come back either. In fact, it would help keep it away. Some of that may be substitution, that you're not eating something else. You're eating soy products instead of animal products. But some of it is the result of the isoflavones themselves as well. So the question is, does this affect hormone levels in premenopausal women? What's the effect on hormones, estrogen levels, sexual hormone binding globulin, and the follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, the circulating progesterone levels, and the menstrual cycle length? See, most of these have no effect. It did have effects consistently of lengthening the menstrual cycle about 1 day. So that was the effect that was seen there, about a 1-day increase in the menstrual cycle. And that had to do with the length of the luteal phase, I think. Not the follicle phase, but the luteal phase, the second half of the cycle. Anyways, but the main point here is it's not really changing estrogen levels at all. There's no significant difference in all of it. So it's not changing hormone levels at normal levels of intake here. And you look among postmenopausal women, and there's no menstrual cycle at this point, and it's not really affecting the estrogen levels there. The E2 level is a little bit higher, but it's still not statistically significant, just a little bit higher, and that could be a good thing in some ways, because estrogen levels really drop, down to the floor at that point, and it causes quite a bit of issues for women. At the other levels are, they're very low, and they don't change with the intake of soy. So hormone levels are pretty safe too. There's been talk, one of the contentions with soy is that if you eat soy products, so likely to be less fertile. Less likely to get pregnant or carry your pregnancy through. So this has been studied carefully too. In 2015, this study was published looking at 315 women who've gone through, quite a few of them, more than one cycle of assisted reproductive technology. Those who ate more soy product, isoflavone milligrams per day down to between 7 and 28 milligrams a day, which is not a really high intake, even at 28 milligrams, they had, an increased possibility of carrying a pregnancy, getting pregnant, carrying the pregnancy through, and having live birth. Not quite twofold, but pretty close to double the odds of getting a live birth by having soy products every day. So is it not only safe? Turns out it's actually beneficial. If someone wants to increase fertility, soy products could be a good thing. That's very different from the information that we've been told and people screaming about in the mid-90s, saying you should stay away from soy if you want to be fertile. It's going to affect your hormones. It's going to make you, it's going to cause a lot of trouble for you. After fertility, there's issues during menopause, hot flashes. And a lot of you women have gone through menopause, and you kind of know what I'm talking about. And, you looking for relief, whatever makes it go away. And that's why there was such a big push for hormone replacement therapy, because you could take estrogen, and it would just take the hot flashes away for a lot of women. But it caused other troubles because it really was estrogen, and it would cause increased risk for breast cancer. So that was kind of a problem, kind of trading off hot flashes for breast cancer. Well, hot flashes are annoying, but breast cancer actually kills you. So when they looked at soy products, looked at 17 different studies, and looked the studies that had enough genistein in them to have an effect actually you can measure. Not only was it just a 12% reduction, it was more like a quarter less hot flashes. Now, if you're having 5 or 6 a day, that's going from 6 to 4 or 5 a day. So it's not like it took them away. They're still there, but they may be less intense and not quite as often. So it's beneficial. It's not, at least it's going in the right direction. It's not one of the things you say, well, it could be I'm having hot flashes because I'm taking soy products. It's probably not the soy products that are causing hot flashes. You can kind of calm down and look someplace else as you're kind of troubleshooting and figure out where these hot flashes are coming from. So that's just, it's not causing trouble. It's actually beneficial. What about for bones among postmenopausal women? What's the effect of phytoestrogens on bone? Will it help bones? Bones are one of those tissues in the body where it has the expression of the alpha and the beta form of the estrogen receptor. So in this graph, these 3 graphs here, among the femoral neck, bone mass density, the Ward's triangle, and the lumbar spine. So measuring at 3 different sites, they have a positive control in here with the hormone replacement therapy. That's estrogen, and they know that that works. One of the issues in women when they go through menopause is that first decade after menopause is that drop in estrogen causes a lot of trouble for bones, and you can actually lose a lot of bone density in that first decade after menopause. So it's really good to know you can do something to boost that level of bones so you don't lose all those bones during that decade there. And physical activity has a lot to do with it, actually. But chemically, it looks like you can do some things too, not just hormone replacement therapy. But this is genistein at 54 milligrams a day, and that was an active form of genistein that the women were taking. And it said it did as well as a hormone replacement therapy in all 3 sites here. And there was a follow-up study. This is from 2002. In 2007, the same group did a similar study, a 2-year study, and they looked at the effect of placebo versus genistein. This is the same 54 milligrams a day, looking at the femoral neck or at the lumbar spine in the graph on the right. And they're seeing an increase in bone mineral density in both of those sites at 2 years, both at 1 year and 2 years. It kept going, and it was improved even more at 2 years than at 1 year. So yeah, Soy Safe, yes, it's actually good for your bones. Actually good for the bones. And when they put all these studies together, not just a couple of studies there, when you put them all together here, then you got a whole bunch of studies again. And don't have time to go through every last study, but this meta-analysis helped you get the big picture and see what do all the studies together show. Because some of them don't have any effect, and some of them have quite a positive effect. You put them all together, you see that there is a positive effect here. And the number here that you will look at is on the total line here. The mean difference, 2.38. That's a positive effect here. It doesn't cross 0 in this point, so you're getting a positive, significant difference in the women who are having soy products. The isoflavones were having a positive effect for bone mineral density on the spine. So that's good news. That's good news that it's not, it's not only negative, but it's actually positive. Another issue that women talked about, or that was brought up for women, is the issue of thyroid hormone. Eat a lot of soy products, it's going to destroy your thyroid. The goitrogens in soy products was going to interfere with the iodine binding, and it would wreak havoc on your thyroid. So the studies have been reviewed, 14 studies in one case, and continual reviews too, and they keep finding there's no effect really on thyroid hormone level. There's for people with normal thyroid function, their thyroid keeps right on functioning, so it's not really an issue. The European Food Safety Authority did a review in 2015, and they found no adverse effects of isoflavones for the mammary gland, uterine, or thyroid. All 3 sites had no issues, no adverse side effects from isoflavone. The scare was really based on this in vitro work back in the mid-90s, and then even earlier than that when they didn't have iodine in the soy formula. They're just kind of playing with that, and they figured out, oh, we need that. Iodine's an essential nutrient, and infants aren't developing right without iodine. Well, that's kind of a issue, that's pretty obvious to us, right? So when they got iodine in the soy formula, the issues went away. No problem with thyroid hormone. If you take thyroid hormone I think you take it without food usually, but if you take it with food, the fiber may slow the absorption of the thyroid hormone. And so that, soy products have fiber in them. So if you take your hormone supplement, your medicine even, with your soy products, yeah, that can make soy interfere in that sense. So could any other bean and anything with fiber. So iodine is necessary for the thyroid to function properly. In fact, iodine, we encourage women and men both to take iodine supplements to get that, because every gland of your body actually requires iodine. Every gland that secretes something uses iodine to maintain normal cell metabolism and function and structure. So iodine is a very beneficial supplement for everybody. But if you have issues, you just need to get it monitored, take care of yourself, and get some iodine for your thyroid as well. So that answers a lot of questions for women, for adult women, adolescents. We'll get back to the puberty question in a little bit here. We want to answer questions for men a little bit, because that's a deal breaker for men. You say, well, it's going to make you effeminate. It's going to lower your testosterone levels. It's going to make you less manly. And again, they've done the research. They look at the effect of testosterone by men who are eating soy products, and just not there. It doesn't affect testosterone levels at the levels of soy protein and soy products that people use. And even that from 2010, that study, newer studies have continued to affirm that conclusion, that isoflavones do not change the level of testosterone. In some cases, if there's something going on, it's probably something else. Exercise, that has a bigger effect on testosterone, obviously. Lifting weight, that's a good thing to boost testosterone. But eating soy products is not going to decrease your levels of testosterone. So men, you can relax. In fact, we have good news for you, men. Good news for you women who have men in your life, too. When you look at the effect of soy products and prostate cancer, you find in the U.S., in the meta-analysis here, there's a 26% decreased risk of prostate cancer for men that are eating soy products. In Asia population, it was even more dramatic, almost a 40% decrease in risk of prostate cancer. So that's great news for men. Not only is it not making you manly, but it's helping you keep your manhood a lot longer. So that's very good news for men. So we've talked about men and women. Let's talk about infants a little bit, because that grabs at people's hearts too. You say, well, soy formula, that's like giving them birth control pills. So it's been studied. That's a valid concern, because you don't want to give your babies birth control pills. No one wants to do that. But so this is studied. Published in 2010 here. It was a beginning study. I think it's out of Arkansas. The group that's doing this study, and they did a follow-up study in 5 years from here. So they looked at these 120 infants. 40 of them were breastfed, 41 had a cow milk formula as infants, and 39 of them had a soy formula. And they looked at them at age 4 months. Among the girls, there's no difference in the feeding group, differences in the breast butter or uterine volume. When they tested those by ultrasounds, they didn't find any difference there. Among the boys, there's no difference in prostate size or in the breast bud volume either. Testicular volume was a little bit lower in both of the formula groups compared to the breastfed baby. So breast milk is still the best, and these formulas are just an experiment trying to copy as best they can what's in breast formula. And it's not a very good copy, but it's not a problem with isoflavones. That's not really the problem of where the issues are. It's not causing hormone levels differences. When you look at this infants at 5 years, they were able to follow up on 101 of them, 50 boys, 51 girls, examining the same organs that would be affected by estrogens and phytoestrogens potentially. And they found among these girls and boys at 5 years of age, there weren't any effects here on reproductive organs and structural characteristics. You couldn't tell the difference. There's probably variation in both groups, and they overlap quite a bit. So you say, well, there's really no difference. I mean, other things affecting those things, but it wasn't the isoflavone. It wasn't the result of them being breastfed or being fed a soy infant formula or cow milk formula as babies. There was one study that was published that did find a small effect in the first year of life. They looked at something called the maturation index, and it was a few measurements put together here to come up with this index. and they looked at the growth rate of this index here, and they saw the breast milk line is on the bottom in the gray, and that's the gray is the confidence interval there. And you find that the cow formula is a little bit closer to it, and the soy formula is a bit different from that. And so they said this was evidence here that was consistent with exposure to exogenous estrogen exposure. So it looks like, at some level, there's estrogen exposure there. This particular paper didn't talk about the two kinds of receptors, even in 2018. I'm not sure about the quality of all the work, but they did some good work in measuring some of these. Among the boys, they found similar things here, especially early on. There's a little bit differences here at about 2 months, and they start to overlap quite a bit by the time you get out to 230 days. So maybe initially the trajectory was a little bit different. They tend to even out, and the girls, they tended to even out as well. What about girls as they get older and it's time for their menstrual cycle to begin? What would the effect of soy be for that, and who would you study to find that information? Well, you look at advanced groups because they eat a lot of soy products, and you find among them. So they queried these girls after, some of them before even. They hadn't reached, when we queried them, they hadn't reached puberty yet, and they hadn't started their monthly cycle, menstruating. But if you look, the red line is the girls who had higher levels of soy, and the average intake was 12 servings a day. So these ones high intakes, there's quite a bit more than that. You have 18 servings, so it's almost 3 a day. 2 or 3 servings of soy products a day. So here, the actual age at which they began menstruating is actually older among the high soy intake ones, not younger. It's actually older. I'm not sure that difference was significant, but I do see a gap there. You look across, that could be 6 months difference in some cases here. You have a lot fewer 10 and 11-year-olds entering menstruation than you have 12 years old. And the average between the groups was really about the same for the average. You look at the 50% line here, they're all together here at 50%. But initially here, between 10 and 12, the group eating soy products had delayed entering into womanhood at that point. So I would say that's the benefit. Difference between an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old entering into that is a pretty big difference in terms of maturity of the girl herself. So, are soy products safe? At one point, we would put a question mark there, but now we can unequivocally say yes, soy products are safe. Knowing that there are 2 receptors for estrogen really changes the whole conversation. It's not the estrogen receptor, it's estrogen receptor alpha, estrogen receptor beta. They're different. They have different effects, and the phytoestrogens often have an opposing effect on the effect of estrogens in the body. And you just can't rely on the animal data, but we don't have to. We have all this clinical data now, population data. We see that soy is beneficial for prostate cancer, for preventing breast cancer, from preventing breast cancer from recurring as well. So you just have to land saying soy actually is beneficial. It's not a harmful food if it's processed properly. This wasn't just fermented soy products. This is soy products in general here, but it was organic. You don't want to eat the genetically modified soybeans that have a whole bunch of Roundup in them. You want to stay away from that. But the organic soy products, they're safe. How much could you eat? Generally, less than 3 servings a day. If you're following the paleo diet, you're not going to eat that much of any cooked food, so you're going to be okay. But even if you had 3 servings a day, you'll still be okay. So the benefits of soy really are overstated in some cases. Someone that's really gung-ho about soy is soy for this and soy for that. Well, soy for hot flashes? Well, going from 6 hot flashes to 5 is not exactly a victory. Or from 6 to 4, even, it's not a victory. 6 to 3, okay, that's something. In some cases, it may work that way. For lowering cholesterol, no, not really. But there's, for reducing risk of breast cancer, yeah, there's some benefits there. But just, it's not this panacea that, soy is going to save everybody. There's a lot more to it than that. On the other hand, the dangers of soy are way overblown. And that's really old. If someone's actually been reading the literature any time in the last oh goodness, 15 years at this point, if they've been reading and looking at the literature on soy products, there's no leg to stand on saying that soy products are dangerous. It's just not there anymore. And soy, it's just a bean. It's just another bean. It's kind of a little bit special, but still a bean. It's just so hard, really, to hurt yourself with an organic bean. I guess if you had some kind of gun and you shoot them when they're not cooked, that would hurt. But if you cook them and just eat them, you're going to be okay. It's incredibly difficult to hurt yourself with an organic bean. So thank you for your attention on that. Paul, we probably have a few questions here and a little bit of time to talk about it.
That sounds great, Dr. Donaldson, and I'm still chuckling on that, hurting somebody with a uncooked bean. That was cute. So is there a difference between the physical composition of somebody with Asian descent as there is from American descent?
As far as the effect of soy, it's more.
No.
What I saw was
as their genetic,
it wasn't
their genetic makeup.
Yeah, there's some differences there, but as far as the metabolism of isoflavones, I think it's really about the same. What we're talking about here, it's not that they have a higher response to isoflavones, it's just that they have just more of them in their body. As far as if you look at osteoporosis and things like that, there is some physical characteristics that are more protective in some of the Asians, I think, than in some of the Caucasian women, Caucasian men too.
Okay. Is there a type of, when we look at the market today, there's all sorts of soy algorithms and soy hot dogs and burgers and things. When we're looking at what people are eating in these studies, can you kind of help? Is it tofu or is it fermented soybeans? What's the makeup of that food? Tempeh, miso?
I think a lot of it was, they queried usually 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 different kinds of foods that were traditionally eaten, especially among the Asian population. And it would be like tofu and soy milk, a lot of them, and maybe some tempeh. And yeah, I'm not Asian, so I don't know what all the different sorts of things eat. There's a fair bit of tofu in there, I think. Among the Adventists, they do have a lot of these soy analogs, where they'd make the hot dogs and the soy burgers and the soy turkey, and that's a little bit different. Even there, I guess they had, among the Adventists, those Adventist girls, they had a positive effect of the soy as well.
Interesting.
I would think, looking at the whole soy sounds like it makes more sense than using some kind of isolated soy product. Because it's a bean. There's good benefits in the rest of the bean, too. It's not just the isoflavones itself.
Yeah, and the fiber and the proteins and everything else that's bound together with the bean. And
yeah,
I think,
the fiber, the
from
protein, the minerals in there.
Yeah. I think for a lot of Americans, we think of soy sauce. That's probably the number one thing we think of when we talk about soy. But I think it's probably a long ways from soy sauce.
Yeah, it's not soy sauce. That's just a salt with a tiny bit of soy in it. That's not a protein source at all. But they would use them as a condiment in a lot of, if they're having rice and noodles and vegetables, they would have some tofu or something in it for some protein. And that's what they would use instead of their meat or chicken or things that they couldn't get.
So did you see anything? I think fermented soy came up in one of the questions. Did you see any benefit for it being fermented over just, not fermented?
I didn't look for a lot of that. I saw one study that Dr. Michael Greger talked about, where they found an effect of the unfermented foods, but not of the fermented.
Okay.
So that, as well, it kind of worked the opposite way in some way. And the whole thing about it has to be fermented, otherwise it's no good for you. I think the science in general would say, well, no, it's the traditional soy products, whether soy milk or tofu or bean curd. I mean, they all worked. There's benefits. It was isoflavones, the phytic acid, and things like that were really a non-issue long term. Short term, you do a study in phytic acids, you find, well, there seems to be an issue there. But when people have that as their usual diet, all their mineral balances work out.
We talked about Asian and Caucasian. Would African American be the same from as far as the findings?
It would probably work the same way. It's not part of their traditional diet. And they look at the rates of breast cancer and say, well, it's due to the soy products in Asia. Well, in Africa, there's very low rates of breast cancer as well. And they don't eat soy in Africa. It's just not something that grows, and they just don't, it's not part of their diet. But if you had soy products, it would have the isoflavones would be beneficial there too for African Americans.
Now, you went through some slides on this, but one of our people here had estrogen-fed pre-cancer 10 years ago, and the doctor advised against soy product. Is eating vegan and wondering if soy-based protein powder would be okay.
Yeah, as far as cancer goes, the answer is yes, it's fine. Actually, the soy would be protective. The phytoestrogens in breast cancer, the answer is that the phytoestrogens have an opposing effect on estrogen in the breast tissue. So it's actually going to be protective. And that doctor was using old information, basically.
If you had a choice between soy milk and almond milk, would you have a preference from a nutritional perspective?
Homemade almond milk or a commercial almond milk?
Homemade for both.
Yeah. I'd probably use some of the soy milk.
Interesting.
And if you look at commercial products, I mean, the almond milk, there's so little almonds in there, it's not even funny. So the soy milk, if you get unsweetened soy milk to put in a recipe or something, that would be okay. A little bit of that would work. And there is more protein. There's more minerals in that naturally occurring in a soybean than in this little sprinkle of almonds that they put into that container of almond milk. When you make it yourself, you can decide how much of that to leave in there, of the almonds, how well you blend it up, and so on.
Could you touch briefly on the dangers of GMO soybeans?
Yeah, the Roundup in there. That's not my expertise in a sense, but we get a lot of information about that. One of the problems is that it's genetically modified, so the actual DNA is different. But you can spray that about 5 times while it's growing with Roundup just to keep the weeds down. And so the FDA had to raise the level of permissible amounts of Roundup in the food chain, just to let those soybeans into the food chain. And so when you eat those, you get a much higher level of Roundup than you would have otherwise. And Roundup has a bad effect on the microbial population in your gut. So it's going to mess up the microbial system in the gut. So when people say, well, I'm allergic to this and I'm allergic to that, maybe it's because they're killing some of the microbes in their gut with Roundup. And it's causing a detrimental effect there. And it may not be due to the food itself, maybe the chemicals on the food. I don't think that's been proven yet, but I do wonder about that. So there's
Well,
other effects of having Roundup on the food too.
Absolutely, yeah. So somebody wants a summary. If they're in their 60s and start to add soy, there are no adverse side effects. Is that correct?
That's correct. No adverse side effects.
And Bragg's liquid aminos is not soy. Is that right? Do you know?
I thought it started with soy protein.
Oh, it doesn't have the naturally occurring MSG, or it does. It does have the naturally occurring MSG. That's what it was. And so people,
right.
I think, use the coconut. Some people are using the coconut liquid aminos to get away from the potential of naturally occurring MSG.
Okay.
I think we've gotten through the questions here. Anything else you want to share? You've got a lot of great information, and it was really eye-opening and educational. A lot of science. It's amazing how much science is out there on the subject of soy. But is there anything you'd like to follow up with here before we close?
Yeah, if someone wants to, all the reference on each slide is there, so you can look on pubmed.gov and type in that PMID number, and it will take you right to the abstract of the study, and a lot of times the full text is available as well. So if you want to study this out more, I give you the references so you can check it out. You don't just have to rely on my word, but it's there, it's open. Anyone can do this as well. Take a look at that and see if you can understand it as well. But yeah, and, basically there aren't adverse effects.
That's pretty amazing, and it sure is contrary to what we heard, 20 years ago. But that's great how science is providing the answers, and we appreciate you pulling this together for us. For those that are interested, the video will be posted here on our website later in the week, Thursday or Friday, so you'll be able to go and pull all those things up and do the further research there. But Dr. Donaldson, we sure appreciate you being with us this evening and for putting this together. And we appreciate everybody joining us this Tuesday night. And if you think about it tomorrow, send Dr. Malcolmus a happy birthday, either on Facebook or through an email. His email address is george@hacres.com. And that's george@hacres.com. And I know we would love to hear from you, and a testimony would certainly brighten up his day. But until next month, may God keep you safe and pray that you're in good health. Good night.